Millionaire Groom hears his bride's secrets the day before the wedding, but his revenge shocked everyone. Imagine spending 3 years of your life with someone you trust completely, planning a future together, sharing your deepest secrets and dreams, only to discover 24 hours before your wedding that everything was a lie. That's exactly what happened to Daniel Richardson, a 32-year-old software genius from Chicago whose artificial intelligence patents were worth over $8 million. 24 hours before walking down the aisle at St. Michael's Cathedral in downtown Chicago, tech mogul Daniel Richardson thought he had everything figured out. His wedding to socialite Amanda Wellington was going to be the event of the year, with 300 guests and a price tag that could have bought a small mansion. The 32-year-old software genius had built his empire from scratch, creating revolutionary artificial intelligence algorithms that were now worth over $8 million in patents alone. He believed he was marrying the woman of his dreams, someone who loved him for who he truly was, beneath all the wealth and success. But sometimes the universe has a twisted sense of timing. As Daniel stood in the marble-floored lobby of the luxury hotel where they were hosting their rehearsal dinner, adjusting his custom-tailored tuxedo one last time, he heard voices drifting from the partially open door of the bridal suite. The distinctive laugh that had once made his heart skip a beat now made his blood run cold. He recognized Amanda's voice immediately, but there was something different about her tone, something calculating and cold that he had never heard before. Curiosity turned to dread as he moved closer to the door, his Italian leather shoes silent against the polished floor. What he was about to discover would shatter not just his heart, but everything he thought he knew about love, trust, and the woman he was supposed to marry in less than 24 hours. The conversation he overheard would transform him from a trusting romantic into someone capable of orchestrating the most elaborate revenge scheme Chicago's high society had ever witnessed. Daniel pressed himself against the wall, his designer watch catching the hallway's crystal chandelier light as his hands began to tremble. He had always prided himself on being a rational man, someone who solved problems with logic and careful planning. But nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to hear from the mouth of his beloved bride-to-be. The words that followed would change everything, setting in motion a chain of events that would make headlines across the country and leave everyone who knew them questioning everything they thought they understood about love and betrayal. "Are you absolutely sure this plan is foolproof?" The voice belonged to Jessica Martinez, Amanda's maid of honor and childhood friend from their exclusive boarding school days. Daniel's heart hammered against his ribcage as he strained to hear every word through the crack in the door. The luxury suite's soundproofing made it difficult, but adrenaline sharpened his senses to an almost supernatural degree. Amanda's response came with a cold laugh that Daniel had never heard before, devoid of any warmth or genuine emotion. "Oh, please, Jessica. Daniel is completely wrapped around my finger. After tomorrow's ceremony, it'll just be a matter of time before I convince him to transfer those AI patents into a joint account that I control." Her voice carried the confidence of someone who had been planning this deception for months, maybe even years. "The poor guy actually thinks I fell in love with some nerdy software developer who got lucky with a few algorithms." Daniel felt his knees buckle, and he had to lean against the marble wall to keep from collapsing. 3 years of what he thought was genuine love, 3 years of planning their future together, building dreams of starting a family and growing old together. Every romantic dinner, every weekend getaway to their cabin in Wisconsin, every time she had looked into his eyes and told him she loved him for who he was inside, not for his money. It had all been an elaborate performance. But what if he gets suspicious? Jessica's voice wavered with uncertainty. Daniel could picture her nervously twisting the diamond bracelet he had given her as a bridesmaid gift, a $20,000 piece that now seemed like blood money. "I mean, you've been pretty obvious about wanting access to his business accounts lately." The pause that followed felt like an eternity. Daniel held his breath, pressing himself closer to the door, praying that no hotel staff would walk by and discover him eavesdropping on his own bride. What Amanda said next would haunt him for the rest of his life. Words that would transform him from a trusting romantic into someone capable of orchestrating the most calculated revenge Chicago had ever seen. "Daniel is too infatuated to notice anything suspicious." Amanda's voice dripped with contempt, each word like a dagger piercing through Daniel's chest. "He's been so busy with his precious algorithms and patent applications that he hasn't even bothered to ask why I've been working late at the art gallery every night for the past 6 months." She paused, and Daniel could hear the sound of champagne being poured. probably from the bottle of Dom Perignon he had sent to her suite as a romantic surprise. Besides, Amanda continued with chilling casualness, men like Daniel are predictable. They work 80-hour weeks, make millions, but they're emotionally starved. All I had to do was show interest in his boring tech presentations and laugh at his awkward jokes. He was so grateful for female attention that he never questioned my motives. The cruelty in her voice was like nothing Daniel had ever heard from the woman he thought he knew better than anyone else in the world. Jessica's nervous laughter filled the silence. I still can't believe you've kept this act up for 3 whole years. Remember when you used to complain about how boring his startup stories were? Now you're about to become Mrs. Richardson and inherit control of a tech empire worth millions. Daniel remembered those startup stories, how Amanda would sit cross-legged on their couch, asking thoughtful questions about machine learning and artificial intelligence, her eyes bright with what he thought was genuine fascination. The best part is that his parents died in that car accident 2 years ago, so there's no family to interfere with our marriage or question my intentions. Amanda's words hit Daniel like a physical blow. His parents' death had been the darkest period of his life, and Amanda had been his rock, comforting him through sleepless nights and helping him navigate the grief. Or so he had thought. Now he realized she had probably seen their deaths as an opportunity, removing potential obstacles to her grand scheme. What Daniel heard next made his blood freeze in his veins, words that would push him from heartbreak into something far more dangerous. Amanda was about to reveal the true scope of her betrayal, and it was worse than anything he could have imagined. What about after the wedding? Jessica asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I mean, you can't keep pretending to love him forever, right? What's the exit strategy? Daniel felt his entire world tilting on its axis as he waited for Amanda's response. He had proposed to her on the rooftop of their favorite restaurant in downtown Chicago, telling her he wanted to spend the rest of his life making her happy. Now he was discovering that she had been planning their marriage's end before it even began. Amanda's laugh was cold and calculating. Oh, that's the beautiful part of the plan. Once I have legal access to his patents and business accounts, I'll give it about 6 months, maybe a year to make it look convincing. Then I'll file for divorce, claiming we're incompatible or that he's too obsessed with work to be a proper husband. She paused to take what sounded like a sip of champagne. Illinois is a no-fault divorce state, which means I'll walk away with half of everything, including those precious AI algorithms that he thinks are going to change the world. But Amanda, Jessica's voice carried a note of genuine concern. What if he fights the divorce? What if he tries to protect his assets? Daniel's hands clenched into fists as he realized the depth of planning that had gone into this betrayal. Every tender moment, every declaration of love, every time she had encouraged him to work harder and develop new technologies, she had been calculating her eventual payout. That's where my father's law firm comes in handy. Amanda's voice took on a triumphant tone. Wellington, Barnes & Associates specializes in high-stakes divorce cases. They've been preparing for this possibility since I first told them about Daniel's potential. They've already identified ways to freeze his assets and claim emotional damages. By the time we're done with him, he'll be lucky to keep 10% of what he's worked so hard to build. Daniel closed his eyes, fighting back waves of nausea as the full scope of the conspiracy became clear. This wasn't just Amanda acting alone. Her entire family, her law firm, probably even some of their mutual friends were all part of an elaborate scheme to destroy his life and steal everything he had worked for since graduating from MIT. There's just one more thing we need to be careful about. Amanda's voice took on a more serious tone, and Daniel detected a hint of nervousness for the first time. My gambling debts are getting out of control, and Marcus Benedetto is starting to lose patience. I owe him almost $2 million, and he's not the kind of man who accepts late payments gracefully. The name Marcus Benedetto sent a chill down Daniel's spine. Even someone as focused on technology as Daniel knew that name from the Chicago Tribune's crime section. Jessica's gasp was audible even through the door. Amanda, you never told me it was that much money. And Benedetto? Are you insane? Everyone knows he's connected to the Torino crime family. What were you thinking? The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place with terrifying clarity. Amanda's sudden interest in marriage, her pushing for a quick engagement, her insistence on a large wedding with expensive gifts. She wasn't just planning to divorce him for his money. She was using their marriage to pay off dangerous debts. I got carried away at those high-stakes poker games in the back rooms of the Millennium Club. Amanda's voice carried a defensive edge. I thought I could win big and pay off my credit cards, but it snowballed. Benedetto gave me until next Friday to come up with the money, or else he'll start collecting in other ways. Daniel felt sick as he imagined what other ways might mean when dealing with someone like Marcus Benedetto. That's why the timeline is so crucial, Amanda continued, her voice regaining its calculating coldness. As soon as we're legally married, I'll have access to Daniel's emergency accounts. He keeps almost $3 million in liquid assets for business opportunities. Benedetto will get his money, and I'll still have enough left over to live comfortably while I work on the bigger score with the patents. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made Daniel's heart leap into his throat. A hotel staff member was approaching with a cart full of flowers for tomorrow's ceremony. Daniel quickly stepped away from the door, pretending to examine one of the expensive paintings hanging in the hallway. As the florist knocked and entered Amanda's suite, Daniel realized he had heard enough to understand the full scope of the betrayal. But what he did next would shock everyone who thought they knew the mild-mannered tech genius from Chicago's North Side. Daniel walked to the men's restroom at the end of the hallway, his legs feeling like rubber with each step. Once inside, he locked the door and stared at his reflection in the mirror. The man looking back at him was no longer the naive romantic who had spent months planning the perfect proposal. His blue eyes, usually warm and trusting, now held a coldness that would have surprised anyone who knew him. 3 years of lies, 3 years of elaborate deception, and all of it orchestrated by the woman he had planned to spend the rest of his life with. He pulled out his smartphone and opened the voice recording app, his hands steadier than they had been in the hallway. If Amanda thought she was the only one capable of planning and deception, she was about to learn just how wrong she could be. Daniel had built a multi-million-dollar company by thinking 10 steps ahead of his competitors, and now he was going to apply that same strategic thinking to something much more personal. The first call he made was to his college roommate, Marcus Chen, who now worked as a private investigator specializing in corporate espionage and fraud cases. Marcus, I need you to drop everything and meet me at my penthouse tonight at midnight. Bring your best surveillance equipment and your forensic accountant friend. I'll pay whatever it costs, but I need a complete background investigation done by tomorrow morning. His second call was to his lawyer, Robert Harrison, interrupting the man's dinner with his family. Robert, I need you to prepare some very specific legal documents tonight. I'm talking about a complete asset protection strategy, offshore accounts, and a prenuptial agreement that needs to be ironclad. Yes, I know it's less than 24 hours before my wedding. That's exactly why we need to move fast. 20 minutes later, Daniel returned to the rehearsal dinner wearing the same smile that had charmed investors and business partners for years. The grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hilton was filled with Chicago's elite, all celebrating what they believed would be the wedding of the year. Amanda glided through the crowd in a stunning black cocktail dress, playing the role of the blushing bride-to-be with Academy Award-worthy performance skills. There's my handsome groom. Amanda practically floated toward him, her arms out styling for an embrace that now made Daniel's skin crawl. I was wondering where you disappeared to, darling. The photographers want to get some candid shots of us with the wedding party. Her smile was radiant, her eyes sparkling with what everyone else would interpret as pure joy. Only Daniel could see the calculation behind those emerald eyes now. Just making some last-minute business calls, sweetheart. Daniel pulled her close, breathing in the expensive perfume he had bought her for Christmas. You know how it is with investors. They don't care that I'm getting married tomorrow. He kissed her forehead gently, the same gesture that had always made her melt in his arms. Now it was all part of his own performance, every bit as carefully orchestrated as hers had been. Amanda's father, Senator William Wellington, approached them with his wife Margaret, both beaming with the pride of parents whose daughter had landed Chicago's most eligible bachelor. Daniel, my boy, I can't tell you how thrilled we are to welcome you to the Wellington family. The senator's handshake was firm, his smile politician perfect. Margaret and I were just discussing how wonderful it will be to have someone with your business acumen helping to guide Amanda's future. The pleasure is all mine, Senator. I've always believed that families should support each other through everything. Daniel's words carried a double meaning that none of them caught. As he spoke, he studied the senator's face, wondering how much of Amanda's plan the distinguished politician knew about. By tomorrow night, Daniel would have his answer to that question and many others. The rehearsal dinner continued with speeches and toasts that now sounded like cruel mockery to Daniel's ears. Amanda's maid of honor, Jessica, stood up with a champagne flute in her trembling hand, clearly struggling with the weight of what she knew. I've known Amanda since we were 14 years old at St. Catherine's Academy, and I've never seen her happier than she is with Daniel. The irony of those words wasn't lost on Daniel, who watched Jessica avoid making eye contact with him throughout her entire speech. Daniel brings out the best in Amanda, Jessica continued, her voice growing stronger as she warmed to her performance. He challenges her intellectually, supports her dreams, and most importantly, he loves her unconditionally. Daniel raised his own glass in acknowledgement, noting how Jessica's hands shook as she delivered lines that were probably scripted by Amanda herself. When it was Daniel's turn to speak, he stood up slowly, looking around the room at faces that would all be very different by this time tomorrow. 3 years ago, I met a woman who changed my life completely. She taught me about trust, about opening your heart to someone completely, and about the power of unconditional love. His voice carried genuine emotion, because in a way he was telling the truth. Amanda had taught him about these things, just not in the way anyone in this room understood. Tomorrow when I say, I do, I'll be making a promise to give Amanda everything she deserves. The double meaning in his words brought a genuine smile to his face for the first time all evening. I've learned that the greatest gift you can give someone is complete honesty, and I promise that Amanda will receive exactly that from me. Tell me in the comments before I continue, when someone betrays your trust this deeply, do you think revenge is justified, or should you just walk away? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what Daniel should do next. Amanda squeezed his hand under the table, completely missing the subtle threat in his carefully chosen words. She was so confident in her own deception that she couldn't imagine Daniel might be capable of matching her level of strategic thinking. After the rehearsal dinner, Daniel excused himself from the after-party, claiming he needed to review some important documents for a client meeting the following week. Amanda barely looked up from her conversation with her sorority sisters, waving him away with a distracted smile. Don't work too late, honey. You need your beauty sleep for our big day tomorrow. If she had been paying attention, she might have noticed the predatory smile that briefly crossed Daniel's face as he left the ballroom. His penthouse apartment in the Gold Coast district had never felt more like a fortress than it did that night. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a spectacular view of Lake Michigan, but Daniel barely noticed the scenery as he paced back and forth, his mind working through the details of what he was about to set in motion. By the time Marcus Chen arrived with his surveillance equipment and forensic accountant, Daniel had already transferred most of his liquid assets to accounts that Amanda would never be able to access. Danny, what the hell is going on? Marcus Chen had been his roommate at MIT and was one of the few people who still called him by his college nickname. You sounded like someone died when you called me earlier. The private investigator was carrying 2 large cases of equipment, and his normally cheerful expression was clouded with concern. Someone did die, Marcus. The Daniel Richardson who trusted people to be who they claimed to be. Daniel's voice was cold and controlled as he explained what he had overheard at the hotel. Marcus listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each detail. By the time Daniel finished recounting Amanda's conversation with Jessica, Marcus was already opening his equipment cases. Jesus Christ, Danny. And you're still planning to go through with the wedding tomorrow? Marcus pulled out a state-of-the-art recording device no bigger than a shirt button. Why don't you just call the whole thing off and save yourself the humiliation? What Marcus didn't understand yet was that Daniel's plan was far more sophisticated than simply exposing Amanda's deception. He was about to orchestrate the most elaborate revenge scheme in Chicago's social history. Because calling off the wedding would be too easy for her, Daniel explained as he watched Marcus set up surveillance equipment throughout the penthouse. Amanda has spent 3 years building this elaborate con, involving her family, her friends, and probably half of Chicago's legal community. She's counting on me being too emotionally devastated to fight back intelligently. Daniel pulled up financial records on his computer, showing Marcus exactly how much money Amanda stood to gain from their divorce. Look at this. Daniel pointed to a series of transactions on his secondary monitor. My forensic accountant friend ran a preliminary check on the Wellington family finances. They're not just dealing with Amanda's gambling debts. The senator has been embezzling campaign funds for years, and their art gallery is a front for money laundering. Amanda's not just a gold digger, Marcus. She's part of a criminal enterprise that's been operating under Chicago's radar for decades. Marcus whistled low under his breath as he reviewed the financial documents. Danny, this is federal crime territory. We're talking about campaign finance violations, money laundering, and fraud on a massive scale. If you're planning what I think you're planning, you need to be very careful not to cross any legal lines yourself. The private investigator had worked enough high-stakes cases to recognize when his client was walking into dangerous territory. "That's exactly why I need your help." Daniel turned to face his old friend, and Marcus could see that the naive tech genius he had known in college was gone forever. "I'm not interested in revenge that lands me in prison. I want justice that's so perfectly legal and so completely devastating that Amanda and her family will spend the rest of their lives paying for what they've done to innocent people." Daniel opened another file on his computer, revealing surveillance photos and financial records that would have impressed FBI investigators. He had been busier in the past few hours than Marcus had realized, and what he had discovered about the Wellington family's criminal activities was just the beginning of his master plan. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, perfect weather for what Chicago society believed would be the wedding of the decade. Daniel woke up after only 3 hours of sleep, but his mind was sharp and focused like never before. Every detail of his plan was in place, from the surveillance equipment hidden throughout the cathedral to the federal investigators who would be positioned among the wedding guests. Amanda had no idea that her fairy tale wedding was about to become her worst nightmare. As Daniel adjusted his handmade Italian tuxedo in the mirror of the groom's suite at St. Michael's Cathedral, he reflected on how much his life had changed in less than 24 hours. Yesterday morning, he had been a man in love, excited about starting a family and building a future with his soulmate. Today, he was someone capable of orchestrating the downfall of an entire criminal organization without breaking a single law in the process. His phone buzzed with a text message from Marcus. "All surveillance equipment in place. Federal agents positioned as wedding photographers and catering staff. Senator Wellington's campaign finance records have been forwarded to the FBI as promised. Amanda's conversation with Benedetto was recorded an hour ago. We have everything we need." Daniel smiled as he read the message, then deleted it immediately. "Daniel, are you ready for this?" Robert Harrison, his lawyer, appeared in the doorway of the groom's suite carrying a briefcase that contained legal documents that would change everything. "Once you sign these papers, there's no turning back. Are you absolutely certain you want to go through with this plan?" The lawyer had been working all night to ensure that every aspect of Daniel's revenge was completely legal and ironclad. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life, Robert." Daniel signed the documents with steady hands, sealing Amanda's fate with each stroke of his pen. By tonight, the Wellington family will understand that they chose the wrong victim for their elaborate con game. What Daniel had planned would not only protect his assets but also ensure that Amanda and her family would face justice for their crimes against others. 300 guests filled St. Michael's Cathedral as the wedding ceremony began with all the pomp and circumstance that Chicago's elite expected. Amanda looked absolutely stunning in her $50,000 wedding dress, walking down the aisle on her father's arm, while the cathedral's massive organ played Pachelbel's Canon in D. Every photographer captured her radiant smile, completely unaware that this would be the last happy moment of her life. Daniel watched his bride approach with a calm expression that impressed even himself. He had spent years building a reputation as someone who remained cool under pressure during high-stakes business negotiations, but this was the ultimate test of his self-control. As Amanda reached the altar and took his hands, he looked into her eyes and saw nothing but greed and calculation disguised as love. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Daniel Richardson and Amanda Wellington in holy matrimony." Father Murphy's voice echoed through the cathedral as he began the traditional ceremony. "Marriage is a sacred bond built on trust, honesty, and mutual respect." The irony of those words would have been funny if the situation weren't so serious. "Daniel, do you take Amanda to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, until death do you part?" Father Murphy's question hung in the air as 300 guests waited for Daniel's response. Amanda squeezed his hands, her smile confident and triumphant, believing that her elaborate con was about to reach its successful conclusion. "I do." Daniel's voice was clear and strong, carrying throughout the cathedral. What Amanda didn't know was that those two words had just triggered a series of legal maneuvers that would destroy her life more completely than she could ever imagine. The trap had been set, and she had just walked directly into it with a smile on her face. "Amanda, do you take Daniel to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, until death do you part?" Father Murphy turned to the bride, who hesitated for just a moment. Daniel watched her face carefully, wondering if she was having second thoughts about her elaborate deception or simply calculating how much money she was about to gain access to. "I do." Amanda's voice was sweet and confident, sealing her own fate with those two words. Daniel slipped the wedding ring onto her finger, a $10,000 platinum band with diamonds that she had specifically requested. What she didn't know was that the ring contained a micro GPS tracking device that would help federal investigators monitor her movements over the coming weeks. "By the power vested in me by the state of Illinois, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Daniel, you may kiss your bride." Father Murphy's declaration brought thunderous applause from the congregation as Daniel leaned in to kiss Amanda. For the photographers and guests, it looked like a romantic moment between newlyweds. In reality, it was the moment that Daniel's carefully orchestrated plan moved into its final phase. As rice and rose petals fell around them during their exit from the cathedral, Amanda whispered in Daniel's ear, "I can't wait to start our new life together, darling. Everything I've ever dreamed of is finally within reach." Her words carried a double meaning that she thought only she understood. Daniel smiled and nodded, playing his role perfectly while knowing that Amanda's dreams were about to become the worst nightmare she could imagine. The reception at the Four Seasons Hotel was everything that Chicago society expected from the wedding of the year. Amanda worked the room like a professional politician, charming guests and building the social connections that she believed would help her maintain her lifestyle after she divorced Daniel and took half his fortune. She had no idea that several of the guests were actually federal agents documenting her every conversation. During the reception dinner, Daniel stood up to give his groom's speech, tapping his champagne glass with a silver spoon to get everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank all of you for being here to celebrate this special day with Amanda and me." His voice carried throughout the ballroom as 300 guests turned their attention to the happy groom. "3 years ago, I thought I knew everything about love and trust. Amanda has been an incredible teacher, showing me depths of human nature that I never knew existed." Daniel paused, looking directly at his new wife, who beamed with pride at what she interpreted as a romantic tribute. "She's taught me that some people are capable of elaborate planning and deception that goes far beyond what innocent people like me could ever imagine." Amanda's smile faltered slightly as she tried to interpret the subtle edge in Daniel's words, but the guests applauded enthusiastically, interpreting his speech as a romantic declaration. "Tonight, I want to make a promise to my beautiful wife. Amanda, you will receive everything you deserve, and I mean that with all my heart." The double meaning in his words brought a genuine smile to Daniel's face for the first time all day. Before I reveal what happened next, let me ask you in the comments, do you think Daniel is handling this situation the right way, or should he have taken a different approach? I'm really curious to hear your opinions on this whole situation. I've learned that the most important thing in marriage is complete honesty, and I promise that Amanda will experience a level of honesty from me that will change her life forever. Daniel raised his champagne glass in a toast, watching as Amanda joined the applause despite the growing confusion in her eyes. She was beginning to sense that something was different about her new husband, but she couldn't quite identify what had changed. As the evening progressed, Amanda began receiving phone calls that made her increasingly nervous. Daniel watched from across the ballroom as she stepped onto the hotel's terrace to take what appeared to be urgent calls from unknown numbers. Her body language became more tense with each conversation, and when she returned to the reception, her perfect composure was starting to crack. "Daniel, I need to speak with you privately for a moment." Amanda's voice carried a note of urgency as she pulled him aside near the ballroom's entrance. "I've been getting some strange phone calls tonight, and I think there might be some kind of misunderstanding about my family's financial situation." For the first time since he had known her, Amanda sounded genuinely frightened rather than calculated and confident. "What kind of misunderstanding, sweetheart?" Daniel's voice was filled with apparent concern as he played his role perfectly. "Is there something I can help you with? You know I'd do anything to protect you and your family." His words were technically true, though Amanda would soon understand that his definition of protection was very different from what she expected. "Someone claiming to be from the FBI called and said they wanted to interview me about campaign finance irregularities involving my father's Senate campaigns." Amanda's voice trembled as she spoke, and Daniel could see genuine fear in her eyes for the first time. "They mentioned something about money laundering through the family art gallery, which is completely ridiculous. You know my family would never be involved in anything illegal." Daniel nodded sympathetically while internally celebrating the fact that his plan was proceeding exactly as he had orchestrated. The federal investigators he had contacted were moving faster than he had expected, and Amanda was about to discover that her elaborate con game had made her family a target of federal law enforcement. Her fairy tale wedding was about to become a federal crime investigation. "I'm sure it's just a routine inquiry, darling. Your father is a prominent senator, so it's natural that federal agencies would want to verify his campaign finances." Daniel's voice was calm and reassuring, even as he watched Amanda's carefully constructed world beginning to crumble around her. "Why don't you call your father's lawyer and see if he can clarify the situation? I'm sure it's nothing serious." What Amanda didn't know was that her father's lawyer, along with most of the Wellington family's legal team, had already been contacted by federal investigators and advised to cooperate fully with the ongoing investigation. The elaborate money laundering scheme that had been operating through their art gallery for years was about to be exposed, and Amanda's gambling debts to Marcus Benedetto had provided federal investigators with the evidence they needed to bring down the entire operation. "Daniel, there's something else." Amanda's voice was barely above a whisper as she struggled to maintain her composure in front of their wedding guests. "Marcus Benedetto called me an hour ago. He says someone contacted him claiming to have information about my gambling debts, and now he's demanding immediate payment of everything I owe him. He's threatening to expose our entire arrangement if I don't give him $2 million by Monday morning." Daniel pretended to be shocked by this revelation, though he was the one who had arranged for federal investigators to contact Benedetto as part of a plea bargain arrangement. "Amanda, you never told me you had gambling debts. How much money are we talking about here?" His performance was Oscar-worthy as he played the role of the concerned husband, discovering his wife's financial problems for the first time. $2 million. Amanda's confession came out in a rush of panic and desperation. "I know I should have told you before the wedding, but I thought I could handle it myself. With access to your business accounts, I figured I could pay him off quietly and you'd never have to know about it." Her admission was exactly what Daniel needed to complete the legal case against her for attempted fraud and conspiracy. "Amanda, I think we need to sit down and have a very serious conversation about honesty in our marriage." Daniel's voice remained calm and supportive, even as his new wife's elaborate deception continued to unravel around them. "Let's go up to the bridal suite where we can talk privately without our guests overhearing." What Amanda didn't realize was that the bridal suite had been equipped with professional recording equipment that would capture every word of her confession. As they entered the luxurious suite overlooking Lake Michigan, Amanda began pacing frantically while Daniel calmly poured himself a glass of champagne from the bottle they had been saving for their wedding night. "Daniel, I know this looks bad, but I can explain everything. The gambling started as just a way to blow off steam from the pressure of planning our wedding, but it got out of control faster than I expected. I understand that gambling can become addictive, sweetheart, but what I'm having trouble understanding is why you didn't trust me enough to ask for help." Daniel sat down in the suite's elegant armchair, watching as Amanda continued to pace like a caged animal. "We're married now, which means your problems are my problems. Why don't you tell me everything starting from the beginning?" Amanda's confession came pouring out in a torrent of guilt and desperation. She told him about the high-stakes poker games at the Millennium Club, about her family's financial problems stemming from her father's embezzlement of campaign funds, and about the money laundering operation they had been running through their art gallery for years. What she didn't confess was her original plan to divorce him and take half his fortune, still believing that she could convince him to help her out of love. "Daniel, I know I've made some terrible mistakes, but I love you so much. Can you ever forgive me for not being completely honest with you?" Amanda's tears were genuine as she knelt beside his chair, taking his hands in hers. "I promise I'll never lie to you again if you can just help me get through this crisis. We can pay off Benedetto together and start fresh with complete honesty between us." Daniel looked into Amanda's tearful eyes and felt something that surprised him: genuine pity. Despite everything she had done, despite the elaborate deception and the planned theft of his life's work, she was still trying to manipulate him with emotional appeals. "Amanda, I want you to know that I heard every word of your conversation with Jessica yesterday before the rehearsal dinner." His voice was quiet and controlled as he delivered the words that would shatter her world completely. "What?" Amanda's face went white as the implications of his statement sank in. "Daniel, I can explain. You don't understand the context of what you heard. Jessica and I were just talking hypothetically about worst-case scenarios in case our marriage didn't work out. Even now, caught in her lie, Amanda was still trying to manipulate the situation with more deceptions. I also know about your plan to transfer my patents to accounts you control, about your intention to divorce me within a year and take half my fortune, and about your family's criminal enterprise that you thought I was too naive to discover." Daniel's voice remained calm as he systematically destroyed every lie Amanda had built their relationship on. "What you never considered was that someone who builds multi-million-dollar companies might be intelligent enough to protect himself." Amanda stared at him in horror as the full scope of her situation became clear. "Daniel, please. I know I made terrible mistakes, but we can work through this together. I'll do anything to make this right between us." Her desperation was genuine now, as she realized that her elaborate con had not only failed, but had made her vulnerable to someone far more intelligent and resourceful than she had ever imagined. "You're absolutely right, Amanda. We are going to work through this together." Daniel stood up and walked to the suite's window, looking out at the Chicago skyline where his new life was about to begin. "Tomorrow morning, you're going to accompany me to the FBI field office where you'll provide a full confession about your family's criminal activities in exchange for a reduced sentence. Your father will resign from the Senate. Your family will forfeit all assets obtained through money laundering, and Marcus Benedetto will no longer be a problem because he's already agreed to cooperate with federal investigators." The final revelation hit Amanda like a physical blow. Daniel had not only discovered her deception, but had turned it into a federal case that would destroy her entire family's criminal empire. Her fairy tale wedding had indeed changed her life forever, just not in the way she had planned. 6 months later, Daniel Richardson stood in the same penthouse where he had planned Amanda's downfall, reading news coverage of the Wellington family's criminal trial. Senator William Wellington had been sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for campaign finance violations and money laundering. Amanda had received 7 years as part of her plea bargain agreement, while her mother Margaret faced 10 years for her role in the art gallery money laundering scheme. The media had dubbed it the Wedding Day Takedown, and Daniel had become something of a folk hero for Chicago residents who were tired of political corruption and elite crime families operating with impunity. His story had been featured on national news programs, with legal experts praising his patience and strategic thinking in bringing down a criminal organization that had been operating for decades. Daniel had never touched a single dollar of Amanda's money or assets, proving that his motivation had been justice rather than revenge. The AI patents that Amanda had tried to steal were now being used to fund a foundation that helped victims of white-collar crime rebuild their lives. In the end, Amanda had been right about one thing. Their marriage had indeed changed, both as Daniel reflected on the past year. He realized that Amanda's betrayal had ultimately made him a stronger and wiser person. He had learned to trust his instincts, to verify claims before accepting them, and to use his intelligence not just for building businesses, but for protecting himself and others from those who would exploit trust and kindness for personal gain. The foundation he had established in honor of his parents' memory was now helping dozens of families who had been victims of sophisticated fraud schemes similar to Amanda's. Daniel found genuine satisfaction in knowing that something positive had emerged from the darkest period of his life, and that his experience was helping prevent others from suffering similar betrayals. Standing in his penthouse office, Daniel opened his laptop and began working on his next artificial intelligence project, this time focused on developing algorithms that could detect patterns of financial fraud and help law enforcement agencies identify white-collar criminals before they could destroy more innocent lives. In a strange way, Amanda had inspired his most important work yet. Sometimes the greatest betrayals lead to the most powerful transformations. Daniel Richardson learned that trust should be earned rather than given freely, and that intelligence combined with patience can be the most devastating weapon against those who prey on good people. Amanda Wellington thought she was marrying a naive tech genius, but she had actually chosen someone whose strategic mind would ensure that justice was served not just for himself, but for every victim of her family's criminal enterprise. The Wedding Day Takedown became a legendary story in Chicago, proving that sometimes the quiet, thoughtful person in the room is the most dangerous opponent you could ever face. Daniel's revenge wasn't just personal, it was a public service that made the world a little bit safer for honest people everywhere. What did you think of Daniel's approach to this betrayal? Have you ever had to deal with someone who completely deceived you about who they really were? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your stories about trust, betrayal, and how you handled situations where someone tried to take advantage of your kindness. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed to our channel because we have more incredible true stories coming your way. Share this video with someone who needs to hear about the power of strategic thinking and never giving up when fighting for justice.